If you just got an iPhone 14 Pro or Pro Max this holiday season, you're gonna wanna watch this video first before you do anything, because these are 5 of the things that you absolutely need to know about your new iPhone 14 Pro or 14 Pro Max. But before we get into everything, I just want to know your favorite feature that you're super excited about with the iPhone 14 Pro or Pro Max. Maybe you just finally got one and you're messing around with it, or you've had one for months. Let me know your favorite new feature that's exclusive to these Pro and Pro Max models in the comments down below. Would love to interact with you guys on that. Or you can follow me on Twitter at Dan Barbera, or even Instagram at DanBarbera1. I would love to hear from you over there. And so with all of that said, let's jump into those new features. So the first thing I highly recommend doing is turning on always on display. And if you've heard about it and think that it's some sort of bad feature that you shouldn't do because it's going to drain your battery, that's not the case anymore, so I wouldn't worry. But what I would do is at least turn it on, give it a shot. If you don't like it, you can always turn it off. I believe it comes out of the box turned off by default. If it's on already, great, then still pay attention to this tip because there's some settings that you should definitely tweak. But what you should do is head into settings right here, and then scroll down to display and brightness. So out of the box by default, the wallpaper here would be showing. This is my wallpaper. And then of course, when it goes into always on display mode, you still see a faint hint. I don't know if it's gonna, you can still see the little part of the mountains here. What it does is it shows a little bit of your wallpaper so that you can still see what you got going on in your lock screen. That's where some of the battery, or where most of the battery drain lies. And so what I would do personally, and also it's distracting, especially if you've got like a picture of your family, maybe you're out in public or something, or you're at work and you want to put it on your desk, and maybe you don't want people to see that wallpaper all the time. So what I would do is go back in the settings menu. Again, this is what it would look like when you turn it on by default. Just go ahead and click or toggle off show wallpaper. And so what it does now is when it goes to sleep, you'll see here it goes to a black screen, and it will show whatever other things you might have. So we'll talk about this little strip here of apps in a second, because that's actually one of our next things. But by default, you won't see that, and it'll just be your notifications and whatever your lock screen widgets and clock is like. And so that is something that I would recommend. If you don't want notifications showing, there was a setting there that you might have seen that says here, show notifications. You can in fact turn that off if you want to. So for me personally, I love always on display. I like to keep with notifications on because that's the whole point in my opinion. I can see which notifications are important or not at a quick glance, maybe at my desk, and I can decide whether or not I need to pick up my phone and use it. The next feature is the Dynamic Island, which is again another exclusive feature to the iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. And Dynamic Island, for those of you who do not know, is basically a new way to interact with the camera cutout portion, which is the new notch, quote unquote. The notch has been removed for the Pro lineup for the 14, and it's now this little cutout, but now Apple made software to kind of interact with that cutout, and so you can have like different timers counting down, your album art to music, and it's interactive, so you can long press and see the widget for that application. So again, if you have album art, if you long press, it'll give you the music control so you can skip or pause or do something like that. Things like live activities can also make their way into the Dynamic Island depending on what it is. So like sports scores is really important. You can follow the game in your Dynamic Island. You don't have to actually be watching if you can't make it, and you don't have to be looking at an app constantly. You can either see it on your lock screen with live activities, or if you're using your phone and you're doing something else, you can actually have the score auto update in the Dynamic Island. And then of course, I'm going to talk to you about some apps that I would recommend that do a really good job of taking advantage of the Dynamic Island. And one of them is Flighty. And so if you go into Flighty and you have flights coming up, you can actually track and see in the Dynamic Island your gate, your flight information, if it's departing soon, boarding, all of that. It's a really good implementation of the Dynamic Island into this app. If you saw those apps on my lock screen, you're wondering how I got that. It's from an app called Lock Launcher, and this also has a really good Dynamic Island set of features. And so if you go into Lock Launcher and go into the settings and under live activities, if you enable live activities, then you can start messing around with some of the Dynamic Island settings. And so if I swipe up here, you'll see I have the hertz there. So it's telling you what my ProMotion hertz rate is at. So right now it's at 60, but if I swipe in between things, you can see it's fluctuating between 120 and 160. And then also you can change it to be pretty much anything you want on the right side. Right now I have the battery percentage, but I can make it the frame rate so I can know exactly how many frames per second, CPU usage, so you can see here. It's using 7% of my CPU right now. If I start swiping and doing things, opening up and scrolling through timelines, we're using more CPU. Let's switch to a different app. And then you can do battery again, like I mentioned, the clock, the default icon, upload speed, that's only for pro users, and same with download, or you can have nothing. It's a really cool set of features for Dynamic Island. And then also there's a bunch of bonus things like you can see here, favorites. These were the apps that were on my lock screen. And so what I can do is if I'm on my lock screen here and I unlock my phone, I can jump into an app really quickly, which is actually pretty cool. And again, if you long press on the Dynamic Island, it also brings up your shortcuts. And then Uber and Lyft have now started to integrate live activities and Dynamic Island information, which is super helpful. And next week I'll be heading out to CES. And so I don't use Uber or Lyft in my hometown. That's just not something that we really need to do all too often. So I haven't had a chance to test it, but I know a lot of people that have been raving about how clutch it is to be able to see the updated info on when your car is coming to pick you up. And so I'm excited to actually test that out. And if you haven't downloaded Uber or Lyft yet to actually try that out on your new iPhone, you should definitely do that if you have an iPhone 14 Pro or Pro Max. On the camera side of things, you know, the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max have the biggest and best camera system that you can get on the iPhone 14 models. You get that extra telephoto lens, which is really nice, but also you get the 48 megapixel main sensor. And if you're wondering why that's important, well, you can take pictures kind of from afar and be able to crop in without losing really any quality or resolution because you have such a large, rate to play with here with that 48 megapixel camera. And so you'll need to turn this on. And so to do that, you'll need to go into settings, then under camera, you'll want to go into format. And if you want to shoot in that 48 megapixel Pro RAW format, which I do want to warn you is going to take up a lot of space. So please do not shoot in this all the time. But whenever you think, hey, this is a great photo, I'm kind of far away, I might want to crop in and I don't want to lose any of that quality or resolution, definitely go in here, go into Pro RAW resolution, and it'll be on 12 megapixel by default. You're going to want to change that into 48 megapixel, and that's your format. And you're still not done. There's one more thing you need to do. You're going to want to head into your camera. When you go to take that photo, if you look up here in the top right corner, the RAW is slashed out. That means it's not on. That means what we turned on and switched to 48 megapixels, it's not quite ready yet. You need to actually tap on that, make sure it's not slashed out there, and now pictures that you take will be 48 megapixels, and you can go ahead and zoom in later on when you're editing your photo, and you shouldn't lose a whole lot of quality, if any at all. And cinematic mode for iPhone 14 Pro or Pro Max just gets even better. Now it's far more cinematic because you can shoot in 4K 24 frames per second, which is definitely something that people will want to do. And so what you want to do for that is when you go into the camera app and you go into cinematic, up here in the top right corner, be sure to change from 4K and 24 frames per second. You can also shoot in 4K 30 frames per second or in just regular 1080 as well if you want to do that, but I would recommend 4K 24. You're going to get the most cinematic shots that you can possibly get because that's, well, the standard for cinematic video. And then the last thing, you probably already got familiar with eSIM already, but if you are watching this video before your iPhone comes in maybe, you should definitely get familiar with how eSIM works. Talk to your carrier, maybe go up to your carrier and make sure that it's going to be a seamless process. I at first did not have a seamless process, but I had a lot of other underlying factors that contributed to that. But what you need to do is convert from physical to digital, and then you'll have your eSIM available. And if you want to switch to another phone that also has eSIM, you can do that actually pretty easily in the settings menu. And it only takes a couple of minutes. I know it's faster to just take the SIM card out and pop it into the new phone, but this is actually a faster process. And then the benefits is when you travel abroad and you need to buy an international SIM, that's actually a much faster process because now it just automatically updates in a matter of moments on your phone, and you have an international number and you have an international data plan, and it's super seamless and easy. And those are the benefits of eSIM, as well as just having multiple lines for work and personal. And so yeah, those are the 5 features that I definitely recommend you try and mess around with first, or if you're just watching this before your new iPhone comes in, get familiar with those. When you get your iPhone, you're going to be really happy to try out those features. They are some of the cooler features with the 14 Pro and Pro Max. And of course, let me know in the comments down below your favorite features, and if there's something that I missed that I should check out, let me know down in those comments. This has been Dan with Mac Rumors. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you around in the next video.